I bet you forgot they were even making these movies. Look, yeah, I know these aren't good and nobody cares, but the main kid almost straight up got killed making this new one, so the least you can do is watch the review. Alright, since it actually has been about 3 years since any of us heard of the Maze Runner series, assuming you had heard of it in the first place, these movies were part of that whole big trend for young adult sci-fi novels grounding in dystopian future settings, imagined as metaphors for the various supposed difficulties of teenage life. The Hunger Games featured a bleak world where decadent grown-ups forced working-class youth into reality TV death battles, where social media popularity was the key to salvation and/or revolution. Divergent offered up a society whose entire caste system was organized around the lines of high school social cliques, while the Maze Runner had the novel twist of male protagonists, basically. Anyway, the first one kind of had a novel setup with a bunch of amnesiac young boys all stuck eking out a life all Lord of the Flies-like in a wooded clearing at the center of a huge maze full of traps and monsters, and wrung a mostly engaging narrative out of things by not explaining what was going on until they finally got out of the maze at the very end, where it turned out they'd been put there by an evil corporation called Wicked, really, that was running behavior experiments to try and find a cure for a zombie virus that had devastated the planet and blah blah, nobody cares. Which was not only a boring reveal, but a downer prospect for the rest of the series, since without the maze and everyone just now having regular identities, we're just stuck doing regular generic post-apocalyptic dystopia bullshit that we've seen a million other times. Now, I'll be honest guys, I'm pretty sure that half of what I think I remember from Maze Runner 2 might have actually been one of the Divergent movies, but either way, the main takeaway is that the remaining heroes have hooked up with an anti-Wicked resistance army on the wastelands, and the lone female member of the boys club turned out to be a scientist who was spying on them for Wiccan and has now gone back to work on the death cure and taken the supposedly cure-having leader of the team with her. As Part 3 opens, she's still doing just that by running weird mind control experiments on her former friend, while the other good guys and our main character are working with the resistance to rescue captured test subjects and plan for a final escape to an island refuge. But he's still trying to get his buddy out of Wicked and harboring hopes of settling things with the turncoat girl because they were kind of a thing before she turned out to be. Look, these movies aren't good. Surprising absolutely no one, their desperate last-ditch mission is impeded by dissension in the ranks on both sides between big-picture true believers and people who just want to fight for the hell of it, and the prospect that the cure might actually be attainable, but at what cost? Boring shootouts, boring chases, boring fights, boring infiltration, boring double crosses ensue for what seems like an eternity, until the whole thing almost turns interesting for the last half hour or so when it's time to blow out the budget on a street riot, skyscraper destruction, and an extended riff on the Star Wars dress up like a stormtrooper and infiltrate the Death Star sequence, wherein people keep pulling off helmets and opening opaque doors to reveal that, oh my god, shocker, a character who I forgot who they were is actually still alive, which would mean something if I hadn't forgotten they died. The whole thing might have honestly been more tolerable if they'd managed to hurry through the dull setups and get right to the decent stuff, but way too much of the first and second acts are given over to meetings and monologues with uninteresting supporting characters who one supposes just kind of have to be there because they were in the book and the fans need to know what the cosplay is supposed to look like. It's not so much bad as it is dull and pointless at that point, since what minuscule point all the heavy-handed message mongering had in the first place was well and fully made by the end of the first one, and there hasn't been much new added to the through line since. So instead, we're just checking off plot points and going through the motions as a well-meaning young cast does their best to prove they can handle action stuff if they're called on to do it in their grown-up careers a few years from now, and the adult cast itself fades into the background save for Walton Goggins as a smarmy half-zombie populist demagogue, and Aidan Gillen giving exactly the performance you expect Aidan Gillen to give. What's unfortunate is once the death cure reaches its climax and you can see the sweep of the trilogy all laid out, it's hard not to think this might have been salvageable if they'd waited a few years and found a way to whittle the complete thing down to just one goddamn movie. But, you know, woulda, coulda, shoulda. As it stands, it's a mediocre finish to a mediocre franchise that's really only coming out by obligation, since most of its fan base has probably graduated from high school and lost interest at this point. If you still haven't managed to care, you're probably not going to care now. 1.5 stars, you can skip it.